Hello and welcome to How to Deal with Grief and Trauma. My name is Nathalie Himmelrich. How to Deal with Grief and Trauma is completely self-funded, produced and edited by me, Nathalie Himmelrich. Consider making a small donation to support the podcast. Go to bit.ly/support, capital G, capital T, and podcast. I repeat, bit.ly/supportgt podcast. Thank you so much. And for more information, please visit Nathalie's website, join the podcast Instagram page, and subscribe to the newsletter to receive updates on future episodes. I hope you have been listening to part 1 with Sarah Campbell, which is episode 188. This is the beginning of this 2-part series, so if you haven't listened to part 1, I recommend you go back to episode number 188 and listen there from the beginning. Enjoy. It's great to hear you say, or did I mishear? Maybe you said death is a great transformer. Did you say that?
Greatest teacher, but yes, I agree with you.
And it's interesting because when you spoke about what happens to families or siblings who haven't spoken to each other, it seems to be like death or imminent death gives a perspective where personality or egos can go to the background.
Soften.
Mm-hmm. And you said portal. It's a portal, a potential for it to be different. Before, when you mentioned the first experience that you had, what came to mind when you said they resonate with the energy around them? What came to me is the co-regulation, that we know how we as a baby co-regulate with our mothers and how we learn to soothe. And I mean, co-regulation happens all the time with people that we are in contact with, even the two of us, where this resonance happens. So your fear, activating fear in another, and then you're being with them and saying it's okay, can do the same on the other side. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important to know for those who maybe face the death of a loved one.
Yeah, and it's also okay to be hysterical and crying by the bedside, and this idea that we have to hold it together, right? Now, being angry or having arguments is different, but that expression of emotion as it just travels through you, you can't necessarily hold it in. So many people try to stay stoic, or they feel like they need to be strong for everybody else. The reality is, we're in those moments. Let them happen in those moments. And the people around us, like you said, the egos soften. They go to the back corner, and new reactions can start forming within families and relationships.
You probably know about the grief literature talking about continuing bonds with the deceased. And the end of life work, if I'm not wrong, focuses on some way of letting go or helping the person let go into whatever is next, which we don't know. So where do you think those two ideas meet, or where do they conflict?
The two ideas of staying connected and letting go.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I see it, the greatest reflection in nature. You know, Thich Nhat Hanh talks a lot about the cloud, seeing the cloud in your tea, and how clouds from the sky fall, create rain and nourishment, and that people we're made of the same elements. And so for me, it's becoming and really being part of nature, and being that's how I experience my own loved ones that have passed. They show themselves to me and communicate through nature. For many people, you know, I feel these realizations have to come very naturally. So when I'm working with a family and they're facing death, I'm there with them in the facing of death. I'm not talking about how they're going to be showing up in a different form.
Mhm.
I also come in with even 30 years of Buddhism. I don't talk about that with the families. I actually feel so blessed that I get to learn about their traditions. I'm there to give them the best experience for them. And it's something we can all really take to heart, that even if we think we know something, we think it's wisdom or knowledge, it doesn't translate to someone else, especially when it's their end of life and it's their experience. And this is why, coming back to being prepared, we just need to talk about it. We have to get through that resistance and tell one of our friends what would be a good death. What would that look like? And of course, to do an advanced care directive, to actually have a living will where these elements at the end are expressed. And when people, they tell me, wow, I tried so many times and I just can't even start with the living will, I invite them to sit with their friends, not their adult children, but their friends. And I say, if it's really challenging for you, find your friends that have the greatest sense of humor and really sit down with them, have a tea, have wine, whatever you want to have, and just go through it 15 minutes at a time. And then meet a week or two later and do another 15 minutes. And I find people come back to me and they report how funny, how much laughter, and they learned so much about their friends that they didn't know. And they would argue certain points. If one of them felt like they wanted to be cremated or they wanted something that the other didn't want, they would argue it, and then they would have to decide on their healthcare praxis. And there comes that decision of choosing someone. If you ever cannot use your own voice, you have a healthcare proxy who, in essence, is that voice. That requires us to actually have these conversations so the person knows. They know your plan, they know your soul, and that's what surprises people. That the person they thought would be their healthcare proxy, they realize they have such different viewpoints on death that they're not sure if they would actually follow through on what they personally would want. And it comes up a lot with couples
Yeah.
that have been married 40, 50 years.
Yes, me and my partner, we did that. We discussed that, and we have different views. But I'm also happy to accept his views and what he would want to do, and vice versa. But I understand that not everyone would be so easy, and also specifically when the time comes when you have to make decisions, it's not always as easy to make that decision. And with my experience on the decision we had to take with my daughter, I know that for me, in my experience, I knew at the time when I knew at the time, and not before or after. It's something that was my experience. If you wouldn't mind sharing, what would be your wish, given all your experience with the dying? What would be your wish for your death? Not only as much as you are prepared and willing to share openly.
Yes. I do hope it's at a very long and healthy life, and surrounded with nature and in a community. I really am doing my best, even now in my mid-40s, to age in community. I'm really looking into intergenerational housing and things that continue to help me learn about aging, but also younger generations. And this is something that I want for my death. I want there to be young people and old people, and to live communally, because many people end up unintended. I never heard one person say to me, I can't wait to grow older and go to a nursing home. Right? They would say anywhere but there. But we have like 70% of elders in America. That's their, and unfortunately, that's not even their final resting place. They're usually moved to a hospital on a 911 call when they're in final stages of dying. And so it's even at my age, it's working against a lot of resistance. I realize even now in my 40s, I need to be planning for this. And what does communal living look like? Because those elders were living communally in the nursing home and assisted living, and they were doing it in essence with strangers. And I feel we're given this opportunity now of, okay, it makes more sense logically to share the care, share resources, and to really live in a way where we're in connection, not isolated in a tiny apartment, but really in the village. So that's a good death, to be surrounded by many different generations. And because I have a Tibetan Buddhist practice, to stay, it's the tradition I found where practicing dying is a daily practice. That awareness is daily. When the Tibetan monks told me, well, we think about this every day, I remember in my early 20s saying, why? Why would you do that to yourself? And watching them over the last 30 years, they have so much joy. I realized, wow, this increases their capacity for life and joy. So I hope to also have that thread, that golden thread of, in that intergenerational community, other practitioners who can hold space for my final moment out of my body.
Sounds beautiful. So not in a short time, but in a long time. But in the meantime, what I'm also interested is what happens to the body of a caregiver, who has witnessed so many deaths. Is there something that accumulation does, or so what does it require for you to stay in life?
It's I don't remember the researcher on this, but there's a great book on when we are really fully present and we're not trying to fix or heal or save, then there's nothing for me to hold on to or take with me. So when I can be fully present, and when someone calls me and says, like someone recently, pancreatic cancer stage 4, my first response was, you're a mother. Don't give up. Let's search for immunotherapy, and are you want to give up? And that was me in some way crossing a line. I wanted to fix, save, or heal. And that's just a very small example. It took me 15 or 20 years to understand how to let people have their own process. And I'm sure you're familiar with that, in the work that you do. It's not my karma unless I make it mine. And I'm really there to be a supportive friend when I come alongside someone and I know this is terminal, I'm going to walk this path with them. I feel like it just expands compassion for me in my life. And there's nothing heavy. It only becomes heavy or exhaustive or tiresome when I cross that line and I want to fix, heal, or save.
So I also spoke to hospice nurse Doula, you might have seen on the episode list. And one of the things I've heard her speak was about becoming close with certain people that she does hospice care for. And the same I can experience with certain clients of mine. So I have compassion with their grieving or their loss. And I want to ask you, how does that happen for you? And is there some caregiver grief that you experience in relation to that?
Yes, absolutely. And it's very important for caregivers to factor that, even for the families who are hiring caregivers for their elders, to factor in time. Now, because I had a home care company, I would ask the families, because they would become very attached to their caregivers. not just me, but we had 24/7 teams, usually 3 to 4 caregivers per elder. And I would ask them for each caregiver who worked 1 year, that at the end of their loved one's life, that they would give them 1 month of pay with no work. And I did not have one family say no. And so for a caregiver who worked with a family for 10 years, one family gave them 10 months of severance, honoring that this was a very big loss for them. And, because I managed the relationship between the caregivers and the families, I would ask on their behalf. I don't know one caregiver who would ask for it themselves, because most of them are so selfless.
Yeah.
But I think as caregivers, we have to factor that in. And yes, I've experienced massive grief, and especially in my early 20s, working with women, volunteering with women going through cancer treatments. And with those families, I often stay connected, and not as a bereavement support, but as a friend, because I'm experiencing the loss too, a different way, but I don't lose contact. And I have more death anniversaries in my phone than birthdays.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to forget someone's anniversary of a significant loss, but I will absolutely probably forget someone's birthday.
Yeah. To go back to what you said before, I remembered now that you said about the birth and death. To me, I think, birth and death is just two ends of the life, and in the sense that we celebrate birth and we make a birth plan, or some people do, not all, but you plan for that birth in some way or other. No one is completely surprised that they're pregnant and they're going to have a child, I hope. And on the other side, there's so much avoidance around that. And I think if we were to have these two, like in my experience, come a little bit closer together, like for me, the birth of my daughter was so close to her death. It was for me, like an honor to be present to this one side and also be present to the other side. I mean, for me, I felt so much honor to be able to guide her through that door, or however we want to call it. So, yeah, I mean, I have a beautiful, also painful experience with that, but also beautiful. Yeah. Another topic that I'm interested in is, there's this growing conversation on medical aid in dying. And also my mother, she died from suicide, but she actually was she was dealing with depression, and that was what led to her suicide. And she wanted to die. So, but for someone whose loved one either chose or was denied it, what does grief look like in those cases? And what does it need? What do you think?
What is the grief like for the loved ones? Often when the loved ones are part of the decision or the process in medical assistance, it's a beautiful ceremony. And we cannot control someone else's choices, but when someone that you love comes to you and says, I can't handle this suffering, I know what the end is going to, it's inevitable, and I'm prepared now. Or I'm not prepared, but I don't want to go through that pain, right? It's not an easy journey. 60% of patients who receive the prescription for medical assistance in death don't actually do it.
Okay, I didn't know that.
It's the peace of mind.
Yeah.
And once they have that, it also opens up so many conversations that families were unwilling to have. Because in that moment, the patient has made a decision. I want this. And that forces the circle of care to move in that direction. And that's when things start taking shape, where like you said, some family members aren't okay with that. They might want more time. That's when the conversation gates open. Every end-of-life experience with medical assistance that I have been part of, and probably I'm at 14, 15 right now, beautiful. absolutely beautiful. Everything that has needed to be said has been said. They plan it in exactly the way that they like to experience it. There are a lot of tears. There's a lot of laughter. It's just, it gives them time, and that feels spacious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so my experience with it has been very, very beautiful. I wasn't with the patient. Only one case where there was so much pain, and he was stage 4 in his 40s and had children. And he decided, like, in some way, he just isolated himself from his family and did that very much on his own. And only someone who would do that is an incredible pain, to not involve their family. But he didn't want to put them through the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worked with his wife after, and his children, to create rituals
Mm-hmm. around
that experience, so that they could have a celebration of his life. And it makes me so sad, because that's what people get to experience often with medical assistance. And most doctors and organizations that provide this service for patients are very much on board with making it the most peaceful and beautiful experience.
When you said that, I remember now my daughter's death, and there were in a lot of ways we could contribute or partake in the decisions, even though I didn't actually know what was happening. But this is what they call end of life session. So in the NICU, there is a specific time where parents are not allowed to be in, because they give the babies rest. And so it happened during that time. And we had such a beautiful nurse there, and she would always invite the next step, or we would ask, and then the next step would happen. So in some way, I think I had this experience that you're talking about in a way with a baby. Obviously not the choice of the choice of the baby per se to die, but in our choose of being with that. And yeah, it's a beautiful way to make it slow down. I think one of the ways we know is that trauma exists in places where you experience something that is either too fast, too much, or too soon for the nervous system to deal with it, and without the adequate person there with you in support. So for me, looking back, the death of my daughter wasn't a trauma. And that is not the same for everyone. Yeah.
Wow. That's powerful. That's very healing, just you sharing that. And for those who have had very traumatic passings, I find it helpful. I'd love to know your insight on this, on ways where it was traumatic, to go back in time, whether it's meditation or even like hypnosis, say the things that you didn't get to say, and see it in a way where you could show up.
You mean in working with clients or personally?
Working with clients, working for those people who didn't get to have that experience.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, because I can't remember who said it. It's someone famous who said, it's never too late to have good childhood. And the same way I see, it's never too late to have a good goodbye, or it's never too late to have a good end of life experience, or it's never too late to celebrate their life. And so one of the ways I work with clients is to help them choose what would it have been if they had more choice, if they had more time, if they had more space. What, even if there's a death that is unprepared for, like a violent death, or there's still ways which we can use, either meditation or hypnosis, or different ways that we can change, because the memory in itself is not fixed. the memory is not a fixed file as we have on our computer. Every time you open it, it's the same. It actually changes with every time you talk about it. And so a memory can even change. The fact doesn't change, but your memory of it, the way you relate to it, changes. And so I think the expectation or the misunderstanding sometimes is, but I can't change the fact. No, the fact is a fact. The same way as loss is a fact, but your grieving is the relationship that you have, and that changes over time. That cannot not change. Mm-hmm. And I think it is often also a question of the timing. That's actually the most important thing about the timing, because it needs a certain readiness for the person to be there to want to change it, because there's also secondary gain for it not changing, for it still be the same, for the pain to still be as it is. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of secondary gain in that. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of misbelief also in relation to the amount of pain equals to love, or the amount of pain equals to the connection that I have with that person. And there's a time frame in which that connection can be softened. But if it's too early, there's actually damage that can be done, because it's not the place where the person is in their grief.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's beautiful. That's something that's not spoken about nearly enough. Specifically this secondary part where there's the gain.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's the importance of the grief journey, I see, because at a certain point, and it's not a measure of days or months, it's also not a measure of stages, it's just a matter of where the person is. And depending on where they're at, there's different understandings that make sense, where before it does not make sense because it does not want to make sense, because the soul is not ready for that pain, that suffering, or that reality maybe to be taken into account.
Mm-hmm. Can feel very overwhelming, because it feels, if I'm kind of guessing here, for many people it could feel like it's a lot of responsibility that they have to then show up in new ways. The identity starts to maybe shift and change.
Yeah.
And that's very scary.
And it also has to do with a lot of preconception and presumptions that people around them make. So there's very common to see, well, someone is at work again, so they must be coping well. And then often the support falls away, and in most cases earlier than would be good. So people make a lot of assumption quickly because, as we said, they're uncomfortable with what if the person isn't fine or hasn't moved on, all these sentences we use, which anyway are a bit difficult. But it's I think to echo what you said already, it's the presence and the willingness to ask questions rather than to assume.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and to be vulnerable and to keep showing up as a villager. I love that you know, what you said is what's keeping a lot of people from moving through. And that's, people see them at work, they see them and they look like they're functioning well. And it's that fear of not knowing what to say and feeling like they need to bring up the elephant in the room. But that's not what's needed. It's just to stay connected and stay in touch with them. And I also, in what you just shared, I can see how it's so easy to want to judge someone that's gone through something very challenging. Well, they look this way. And just that mindset. And I think if we find ourselves in that mindset, that's like a moment to know. That's a signal of, I need to connect with them. Mm-hmm. Not, I need to assume how they're doing or feeling, but I want to reach out to them and just say, hello, how are you doing? Or would you like to take a walk? Or I noticed that color purple looks so nice on you, just to keep a connection going. But what you shared was so interesting. I've seen it in myself doing that. Well, they look fine. I'm glad they're doing so good. And then moving on, not even really reaching out. And yeah, thank you for that. That's not the way I want to show up.
Yeah. And it's so easy. We are fooled by looks, right? So it's the mind also trying to make good or always look on the bright side. And, even months later, years later. So, for example, a friend of mine whose daughter lost her baby, and then she had another child. There was a lot of space in between, but still to say, well, how is that for you now being a second time grandmother? To not lose sight of the loss because there's something new coming into life. However the time span is. As you were saying, your diary is filled with more death anniversary than birthdays. It's like there's this one friend who wrote me Christmas cards when cards were still a thing, who put the names of both of my daughters into the card, just to make a mention of her name. It could be a small gesture like that, which makes such a difference in a person's life. And that is why I love the work that I do, talking to people and being that person that has the possibility to be present in the face of so much loss. People would normally say, oh, it must be such a hard work you're doing. I'm like, no, for me, it's not hard. And that's why I'm doing it, because I can, because I'm willing, because I'm open, and I can be, as you, a good person to walk alongside them.
Yes. When practitioners are feeling very exhausted, I often find they're isolated, and they may be going home and talking with their spouse, their partner, or their friends about their work. But that conversation changes when you go to a peer group instead. And so for practitioners listening, if you find yourself exhausted, find yourself a peer group. It doesn't have to be mentorship. It could just be meeting with another practitioner, facilitator, and having the kind of people who know about the kind of work you're doing, who understand trauma, grief, and loss. And that's the place to have client talk, patient talk, self-love, caring for the caregiver talk. That was a very big upgrade in my life through COVID. I found so many people online doing the work that I had been doing, but I'd never been in conversation with anyone really until we were all locked inside. And it gave me so much energy and hope and inspiration. And with that, I never feel exhausted anymore.
So you teach death doulas. So what is the one thing that you teach that surprises people most? Something they might have assumed about this work that turns out to be wrong or different?
The most surprising thing people learn in becoming a death doula is how powerful their presence is. It's simply their presence. And so many people have all these thoughts about what they should be doing and how to be enough, and that they have so many ideas that revolve around doing and doing and doing more and building and creating. And they come to realize within the first 2 to 3 weeks of the training, wow, I didn't know that my presence was this powerful. And why is it so hard to stay silent? Why can't I stay quiet? Why do I feel like I need to say something in the silence? How can I, and this is where volunteering in hospice, which is something I recommend every student in our courses do in their community at the same time, so that they have that experience if they're not already working or serving or volunteering in some way. then they have a group to come to, and we talk about those experiences. And that is the biggest surprise, how powerful presence is. And people learn that just online, just in how everyone is talking and sharing about their end of life experiences, their caregiving experiences. And it's really rewarding to witness that in a group setting. And it's like popcorn. One goes off and the next, and it's the osmosis.
Yeah.
And we all know how tiresome it can be if we cross that threshold of fix, heal, or save.
Yeah. It's interesting because I would say exact the same to supporters for those who are grieving or dealing with trauma. It's presence. And one of the things in relation to those three words you say, I would say to people, stop trying to fix, fade, or change whatever they're feeling.
Yes. Yeah. And what also comes to mind is stop trying to be optimistic in certain circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Our role isn't to bring happiness and bring joy. That's impossible. It's really just accepting what is and being willing to stay in the room for that and to notice how their breath changes, their body language, and to let them just really be in that process without changing. It's such a practice.
Yeah. And for those of you listening here, you can't see Sierra, but actually it is this presence that is palpable here while talking to you through a video call. So this is the one of those times where I feel sad that this is just an audio podcast and not a video, because it is palpable here in the room with you. And I recommend those who want to see you, they go and watch your TED Talk, because this is where I think there's a lot, especially in a TED Talk, which is really intense, I guess, for you as the speaker. It is really palpable as well. So thank you so much for the time you've shared with us.
Thank you, Nathalie. It's really an honor to be here and to be with all of your listeners.
Thanks for listening to How to Deal with Grief and Trauma. If you'd like to be updated on future episodes, please subscribe to our newsletter on nathaliehimmelrich.com. If you need grief support, please contact me for a 30 minutes free discovery session. How to Deal with Grief and Trauma is produced and edited by me, Nathalie Himmelrich. To support this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe to or follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you. And remember to keep breathing. I promise it will get easier.